So thank you for inviting me to this event today, and thank you for making me feel so very welcome at this my first visit to Ukraine. I'm having a great time here. I'd like to start in a slightly strange way by congratulating your country on its spectacular performance in the recent Paralympic Games. You'll know that we all came second to China because they have billions of people, but the UK got the second largest number of medals and the Ukraine got the third largest. I think such performance reflects investment, and I think such investment is the mark of a truly civilized society. So I'm very happy to be in a civilized place. I'm not here to make political points, but I do think that it's a really impressive performance, especially as your country is experiencing some turbulence in the east with your neighbor Russia, which I hope is resolved very soon. I guess I'd better introduce myself. I'm Bob Wutton. I'm 61 years old, and I've spent 42 years in advertising. I spent more than 20 years in agencies, always in media, though I've owned and managed agencies. And I've sometimes directed accounts as well. And then for the past 20 years, until April this year, I was director of the UK Advertisers Association. Along with its sister body in the United States, the ANA, ISBA is a global net exporter of best practice, guidance. And in the past few months alone, they've issued new model contracts for advertisers dealing with media agencies and with online vloggers. And they've issued extensive guidance on the use of programmatic media. I now run my own consulting business, which is called Deconstruction, which acts as an umbrella for my different business interests. So, the business of modern media is complex. As you'll know, the days when clients were the only source of agencies' income have long gone. The number of media channels and ways of using them has exploded. And now that tech has more or less taken over advertising, the space has become infested with jargon and bullshit. I'll come back to this in a minute too. So now you have my credentials, I'd like to give roughly equal parts of my time with you today into two subjects. The first is my view as to the status of out-of-home. This will be quite a UK perspective, so you can aim off for your own experiences. And the second section is some thoughts on what advertisers are thinking about, what's on their minds, because I've spent 20 years moving amongst them, so this is where I'm really quite expert. So the status of out-of-home first. It was described in 1994 by an old friend and colleague and founder of the PhD network that now resides within Omnicom as the last broadcast medium. This wasn't exactly right, but it was a pretty visionary thing to say, and it's pretty close to true. In the UK, our printed media have suffered terribly at the hands of the internet. Classified advertising, once a major revenue stream, particularly for the thousands of local newspapers we used to have, has virtually disappeared online, and we now have just over 100 local newspapers where we had thousands. National display advertising spend in newspapers is falling by double digits every year, so that's not a sustainable business. But nobody could have predicted the resilience of television in the online age. We now have over 700 channels of television in the UK, and we have streaming entrants like Netflix and Amazon. And it also turns out that young people's media consumption is perhaps not as drastically different as some people would have us believe. I was just on the way in here reading a news feed today that said yet again that nobody in their 20s reads magazines in the UK anymore. That is not true. We have some of the best media research in the world, and it confirms that people between the age of 15 and 24 are reading as many magazines as they ever did, and they still like paper magazines as well as tablets. It suits the online community to persuade us that nobody's using our old media anymore. It's not completely true. Now, this hasn't stopped Google asserting that over 20% of all television budgets in the UK should now be spent on YouTube. Fortunately, this is not getting very much credibility and traction. Prime TV channels are popular with advertisers because they deliver reach, which equates to fame for brands. And they deliver reach because they broadcast great and diverse content, shows. They've not fallen into the trap that others have of describing everything as a commodity called content. You never hear a television broadcaster talking about content. You hear them talking about programs and shows that they're very proud of. It's a key linguistic distinction. But TV isn't the only medium that can deliver reach and frame. This is one of out-of-home's great strengths too. And you'll have seen hundreds of slides like this. This is one of our favorites in London. This has a daily traffic of hundreds of thousands of people. It's a very famous, expensive, high-profile site. The widespread development into these premium panels and digital screens enhances the medium's strength and appeal. Not only can it deliver great impact and reach, it has local targetability, but it can now be used to flight multiple creative executions digitally by time of day, by location. It can target relevant moods of people, different events. However, the medium makes enormous demands on creatives. You would think something so simple as a panel would be really simple to fill. It's really, really difficult. And advertising like this is very, very rare. It's very famous in the UK, possibly internationally as well, but it's very, very difficult. Saying less is much harder than saying more. In an audiovisually oriented society, the craft of writing advertising copy is in decline. This is reflected in our society at large. We have more people in higher education than ever, and yet, as an employer, I know that levels of literacy, written and verbal literacy, are falling, which is a real paradox. And I often see serious business documents in front of me with very, very poor spelling and grammar. It might just be me getting old, but it really annoys me. So there's a constant need for the out-of-home industry to educate and re-educate by helping foster creative skills, for example, through creative awards, and these are a few of the ones we have in the UK. I've already mentioned Root, on whose board I used to sit and with whom I remain close. The UK out-of-home industry has been consistent through the good times and bad in investing in world-leading audience measurement. I can't go into its technical detail today, but the system measures audience flows, which means that it can tell an audience at a place whether there is a billboard or a panel at that place or not. So it's a fantastic tool for out-of-home media owners to predict where they should best locate their inventory. Its method also allows very credible calculation of net audience reach. This is very important because that's what advertisers buy. They don't buy GRPs. GRPs are the means to reach. They buy reach. So to have a system that delivers reach is very important. It's a really excellent system. I've seen some amazing things done with it, mainly by the out-of-home specialists. The media owners have been slower to transition from a real estate mentality to a selling audience mentality. And you might find that resonates with you, I don't know, but it's certainly true in the UK. That and a lack of common IT systems are probably the two things that have slowed down the penetration of this excellent audience research. But we have it, and it will develop over the next few years. We also have a very, very strong tradition of advertising effectiveness studies in the UK. Our agency body has run a competition every 2 years for the last 25 years that gets very serious, high-level academic entries, submissions from advertisers and agencies about how their advertising actually worked. And this database, this is a screen pull from the portal. This is completely searchable, so you can search if you want to look at out-of-home or radio, or if you want to look at chocolate or alcohol or cars, you can search it and you can quickly get to best practice cases of what has worked. It's a fantastic resource. Of the 1,278 case histories that are on this database, 458 of them used out of home, which is great news. And I'm going to talk a little more about media combination in a minute. One of this year's shortlist entries is for, I don't know whether you pronounce this Sixt or Sixty, but it's a van rental company. You have it here. I saw some billboards. And they use out-of-home almost exclusively, and they're quite famous for it. Our media owners also have a good long history of investing in effectiveness research. The market tends to view research conducted by interested parties with less credibility than independent cross-industry research, but some of this stuff is really, really good. Clear Channel's work with COG Research for super premium digital out-of-home Storm shows that premium digital out-of-home drives brand fame better than standard out-of-home formats, and its performance even comes close to that of the advertiser's favorite, TV. If you read FEPI's excellent regular newsletter, you might know that we have a collective marketing body in the UK for out-of-home called Outsmart. And they've recently downscaled slightly from their sales and marketing activities, but they've kept their effectiveness hub going, and it's really brilliant. And this is just a screen pull of their hub. And as you can see, again, you can look at different brands, different sectors, and so on, and you can get insight into how better to use out-of-home. It's a fantastic marketing tool. And some of the stuff they produce, I'm just going to have a couple of slightly boring charts, slightly out of focus because of the screen pull, but they show, for example, that out-of-home has a very strong amplifying effect on other media channels, and how it impacts very positively on long-term brand metrics. So these are the kind of things that advertisers will be really interested in seeing. This is real revenue. So it's my strong view that out-of-home has plenty of good things to say about itself. And I haven't even talked about the impressive scale of innovation and investment that is transforming the medium from boards and paper to illuminated, digital, dynamic, organic screens. At scale, some very big scale screens too. So I'm going to conclude my first half of my presentation with a few comments about the context for out-of-home. Because we've lived through several years of, I think what I've just said, online has been deeply in fashion and everything else deeply out of fashion with agencies and advertisers. It is a fashion business. At last, online is now being considered in a more objective and critical way in the UK. For all its ability to target more precisely than most other media, some precise targeting is not proving to be quite as effective as its perpetrators once thought. You might have picked up this news that one of the biggest and most sophisticated advertisers in the world has seen sales decline and has investigated sales decline and has attributed it in part to the way it uses media, and specifically to the very large amount of money that it spent online, and particularly through its global deal with Facebook. In my experience, a number of major global brands are now beginning to ask similar questions. They will all come up with different answers, but they're asking at last, 10 years too late, the right question. And then just last week, we learn that Facebook has been overstating its video views by between 60 and 80%. What we haven't heard yet is a bunch of big American advertisers going to Facebook and saying, can we have our money back? That's probably going to hit the news next week. But if you'd spent all that money on something that didn't exist, you might ask for some of your money back. This isn't going to go to bed. It hasn't stopped Google and Facebook achieving great power, but it does remind us that media is ever changing. And as I wrote this, the acknowledged expert in the UK on advertising effectiveness, a man called Peter Field, just published his latest analysis of that IPA database that I referred to earlier. And it tells us a few interesting things. That classic and digital media work best in combination, that the proportion of ad spend on digital has probably peaked, or should. Newspapers work particularly well with social media, which do not work particularly well by themselves. Recent work by our magazine body, Magnetic, confirms this study. So I believe that out-of-home will have a very strong part to play in the future in the creation of brand fame that drives mass brands. especially when used to amplify other media channels, as a growing body of evidence shows. And you don't need me to tell you that, for example, if online channels are in favour and taking lots of money, and out-of-home amplifies online, then online can attach its fortune to the fortune of online to its financial benefit. So, that was part one, a little bit about out-of-home, very simplistic. Part two, what are advertisers thinking? Online has been successful, certainly in the UK, and I believe globally, for another reason. It's quite profitable for agencies to recommend. Remuneration is quite high. For agencies, it's simply much more profitable to plan clients' budgets into online channels at the moment. The media can afford to remunerate them well because they take a lot of money and they don't have to carry a significant cost overhead of newsrooms, broadcast studios, or the costs that you carry as bill posters of physical structures and rent and utilities. But the complexity of the online value chain offers agencies much greater margin opportunity too. Data management platforms, agency trading desks, demand-side platforms, even ad networks all offer income opportunities, either via kickbacks or, if they own stakes in them, through further dividend shares. So no wonder it's estimated that only the smaller half of media budgets online actually become what advertisers call working media. Working media is media that actually appears somewhere in front of a person that can act on it. It's real media, it's not theoretical media. Then there's the granularity and acceleration which programmatic brings to processes. And my pet hate, retargeting, both of which add further complexity and offer the opportunity to make margin, whether or not they enhance return on investment. Add in the fact that less than half of the ads served online can be viewed by humans at all, and then usually for a very short amount of time, because they're off-screen or behind another page, or because the ad impression itself is not real, it's a fraudulent ad impression, and there are billions of fraudulent ad impressions, often brought to us courtesy of organised crime. And suddenly you get to a tiny percentage of what you're actually spending money on getting through to a consumer. And worse, ads can appear in really nasty places like jihadi propaganda, even beheadings. This is a nightmare for any reputable company that invests over time in its brands. In the past, if an ad appeared next to hostile editorial in a newspaper, there'd probably be a conversation between the advertiser, the agency, and the publisher about not paying for the space and having compensation. But you're talking here about a single ad impression with a value of a fraction of a cent, with a negative impact on the brand, once shared virally, that can run into hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. It's a completely different value construct. Switched-on advertisers have therefore demanded that their agencies and other online tech companies operate strict white lists of acceptable online sites to prevent this happening, and that has worked. In the billions of impressions online, there are very, very few of these bad examples. The trouble is that if the bad example happens to you, it's probably going to lose you your job. For you as an individual, it's a life-threatening experience. So it goes from everything's pretty clean to I've lost my job in minutes. I've spoken to a number of people to whom this has happened, and they can tell you it really, really hurts. Then we have another threat, which you've probably all read about as well, the whole thing about ad blocking. 1 in 4 people, just about 1 in 4 people in the UK now use an ad blocker. Apple's had ad blocking as default standard in iOS since iOS 8. At least one of the UK's mobile phone networks now works with an ad blocker called Shine, which is very aggressive. An ad blocker called Peace, on the other hand, launched on the App Store about 9 months ago and withdrew after 24 hours because its inventor decided that he wasn't doing the right thing. Interesting. But then you've got a company like AdBlock Plus, which is very, very popular, very well adopted. AdBlock Plus have now started selling ads. So they've actually demonstrated that they're really a protection racket business. But they're very, very successful. So much then for the unchallenged benefits of the online channel. Finally, for the last decade or more, you'll know this, agency remuneration has been under enormous pressure from client procurement teams. Media pricing guarantees and reverse auctions are now commonplace in pitches, whether they're conducted manually or even orchestrated through automated online portals. Agencies compete aggressively, sometimes even suicidally, to maintain trading volumes, and this has led to some consequences that are, for the clients at least, unintended. Unable to make a satisfactory margin for their publicly quoted owners from declared fees or commission, agencies now routinely seek more and more back from the media owners. This can be in the form of rebates, often geared to volume, but it can include many other things. Fees for non-existent consultancy, free media, which the agency can aggregate and use at its own discretion to sweeten souring client relationships or to sweeten pitches. But you know this already. How many of you have seen this before? Right. That's quite usual. Amongst advertisers, this is a very, very famous and very, very secret document produced by the global advertiser body, the World Federation of Advertisers, and conducted by a man who headed trading at both WPP and within Dentsu Aegis. And it identifies 21 ways in which media agencies make money invisibly to their clients. It's a very secret and very famous document, but that's what it looks like. 3 years old, it's quite brilliant. But we've got stuff going on in the US as well. You've probably read what's happening in the US. They recently had a very big survey into agency behaviors, and they discovered that after convincing themselves that everything was fine for about 15 years, that actually they had a problem too. The survey was conducted by Ubiquity, which is the world's biggest media auditor, but more interesting, by a company called K2, which is a corporate risk and intelligence consultancy. Very interesting company that advises companies, for example, if you're going out to a dangerous territory, it'll advise you on security and how to behave and how to set your business and your family up. It's a very interesting company. So this is very serious inquiry indeed. And this has led to serious questions now being asked of media agencies, and, this is the interesting bit, serious questions being asked by advertisers' senior management of the advertiser personnel who run these budgets. There's some real scrutiny going on. And this has led to the development and application of the new model agency contract that my last business, ISBA, pioneered, which is now spreading out to the US, and it's a very aggressive contract. We've also seen increased uptake of performance and compliance auditing in the UK and increased interest in media consultancies. One company I advise, called MediaSense, is seeing really dramatically increasing business as a result of this study and the concerns that it's raised. But there's also a good side to this. At last, there's a growing undercurrent of realization that some of the procurement practices I've just referred to may have been superficially successful in driving price, but they may also have been quite damaging to creativity and the creation of long-term brand value and partner trust. So there's a lot of change happening. The UK's leading independent media agencies, so not aligned with WPP, Omnicom, and the like, are now beginning to orient themselves to offering a completely transparent offering. And they're actually saying to their clients, you tell me what transparency looks like to you, and I will deliver it. They're completely open book. And there are also some new entrants to the market. One of these, and this is a bit of a shameless advertisement, is for a company called Blackwood 7, who I'm also involved with. I'm a director of Blackwood 7 in the UK. It came out of Denmark, spread across the Nordics, acquired a partner in Germany, where it now has Volkswagen, Vodafone, and Reckitt Benckiser as its first clients. This is no startup. Normally, an agency takes 10 years to get one client of that size. This agency has existed for less than 15 months. It's now acquired in the US, where its clients are mainly responsive consumer tech, It's picked up Betfair, it's picked up Dollar Shave Club, which has just been acquired by Unilever, so that gives it an inroad into Unilever. It uses advanced tech and artificial intelligence for comms planning and typically delivers performance uplifts of about 40% for its clients, with a level of accuracy predicted of between 88 and 92%, which is near certainty. So it can now tell you as an advertiser whether you should spend and how much you will spend and what you will sell. This is transformative business. And so, at last, after 90 years, we can do this. It's attracted a lot of interest in the UK, despite the fact that we didn't actually launch it until 2 days ago. So we're going to have quite some fun this autumn. Its outputs are very different from each of its clients and brands, but one thing that's interesting for you is it tends to repatriate budgets that have swung online back into classic media. Television, print, and out of home all tend to get greater shares of budget through this system. It's not a promise, it's just we've observed it in every single example so far. And because it's transparent and it's not funded from media commissions and rebates, it gets a really good reception from media owners. Certainly in the UK, our media owners are very tired of having to pay the media agencies quite a lot of money to appear on media schedules. So they welcome this. The relationship we have with the media owners in the UK are very strong. So I'll finish by saying we live in incredibly interesting times, and trust me, it's only going to get more interesting. I see out of home in a very strong position. Investment and innovation have been impressive, and it's been shown now to drive long-term brand value. It amplifies other popular media channels, and its revenues can benefit from those associations. However, good audience metrics, ROI studies and case histories, and awarding creativity are not just important, but they're vital to the out-of-home market's competitiveness, continued competitiveness. They're a price of doing business, not an item of discretionary expenditure when the market is good. And meanwhile, after a number of scandals and investigations, advertisers are finally taking much more interest in the business of media. So the opportunity to make invisible margins will diminish. And if agencies don't adapt, they will find other new entrants coming along and eating their lunch. Thank you very much for listening.